one of the very first talks that I gave was a very factual talk. That was apparently before I was the bad news guy. I could just give you information and encouragement. And back in that speech, I pointed out how much longer people were living today. And this is now old data. I can't tell you what the current data is, but in the 1999, so 10 years ago, Surgeon General's report, which he's required to give every so often, kind of like a census, he gave a report on aging at that time and pointed out that the average lifespan in 1900 was 47. And the average lifespan in 1995 was 75. So essentially in 1 century, we added, nearly 30 years of life. Now, obviously that was in part because, statistics, you have to watch those things. In part because we reduced dramatically infant mortality. So that raised the number pretty good just by having healthy babies. But we also learned a lot about diseases, and we learned how to be healthier people. We learned the kinds of things we were doing that probably were not helping us. We developed antibiotics and serums and other types of treatment that helped people live longer. That number has continued to rise. I believe today that 75 in only 10 years is now about 78. So we've already added another 3 years on average. So we're all living longer. Americans aged 85 and older were, and I believe continue to be, the fastest growing part of the population. Now again, just gotta watch your statistics. Why is that? It's because very few people lived past 85. 50 years ago. And today, it's not at all unusual to live to be 85. We talked about quality of life then. What was important is finding the way to have the highest quality of life. And what is the quality of life? Well, it's defined pretty much any way you want it to, but it certainly comes down to 3 major factors: your physical health, your emotional health, and your social health. And we talked back then in this speech about the importance of maintaining your health, good attention to your doctors and what your doctors recommend, eating healthy, physical activity, etc. We talked about your emotional health, the importance of finding joy in your life, the importance of maintaining a lifestyle that gave you a sense of fulfillment, sometimes a sense of production. And we also talked about the importance of social health. Social health being staying engaged with the world, being involved with other people, paying attention to the things happening around you, doing things together with people. So being involved in the world. And the Surgeon General in his report back in '99 was very clear that those 3 factors were a critical part of being a healthy and happy individual. So of course I was giving the talk to the support network, so we had to tie it into, well, what is the impact of cognitive loss, changes in memory and thinking on quality of life? And again, I was just giving information in those days. So we talked about, of course, the fact that cognitive changes, brain changes occur because of things like Alzheimer's disease, things like strokes, vascular dementia, we call it, and then other types of diseases that can affect the brain. We talked about there was a lot of things happening in those days, and fortunately continue to happen, in trying to understand what causes these changes in the brain. Unfortunately, my first bad news of the day, I can't tell you that we've made a huge amount of change or progress, at least at the what's going to help you today level, in those 10 years since we first had this conversation. We have not had a lot of changes in medications that are available. We've not had a lot of changes in treatment. But we have got a lot of information. It's yet to be translated into understanding how we can make a difference in a given brain. But we are at least making that progress. We talked a little bit about the medication. 10 years ago, there were some new medicines on the table, and those are medicines that you're all now probably pretty familiar with. What has not changed is that they only work some of the time for some of the people, and they don't do a lot. Okay, they slow it down. That's the best we can offer, and that ain't a bad thing, but it's not a cure, it's not reversal, it's none of the things that we ultimately want to see. We talked, and always I'm preaching to the choir on this one, but we talked about the importance of having support, of using things like this, getting information from hopefully reasonably knowledgeable people, using the support network and all the services that they provide, staying in touch with your professionals who can provide both informational support as well as emotional support. You talked about the importance of being proactive if you knew there was cognitive change occurring. Staying in touch again with professionals, both at the medical side in terms of the illness itself, but also in terms of legal and other professional requirements that you needed to be prepared for. In that talk, we also talked a little bit about depression, the risks of depression with aging, not just with cognitive decline or being the loved one of someone that may have a cognitive decline like Alzheimer's. But we talked about the fact that depression occurs, you can't run from it, you need to pay attention and treat it. And the good news is, that's one of the areas we have made lots of progress in. There's lots of good medications for depression, and there are lots of professionals like me who hopefully can be of some assistance in helping you through the tough times. There's no question that life in later years can be challenging. My father used to say, growing old is not for sissies. He was right. You know, maintaining quality of life, I told you back then, was related to adequate preparation, prevention, and timely intervention as you see things changing with your age. Ideally, we all like this one, ideally successful aging is the art of avoiding disease and disability, sustaining high cognitive function, and staying physically healthy. Okay, we'd all like to have that one. That's not real. That isn't the reality that most of us have to face as we get older. So what's the key to quality of life? I told you back then, I think it still applies. Adaptability. Being able to prepare and practice for change, appreciate change, and adapt your own perception about your quality of life to what reality is. And clearly, in those days, I was talking very much to you as caregivers, appreciating that that's a change nobody wanted